Imagine standing in front of hundreds of people, about to celebrate the biggest achievement of your life, when suddenly your maid kisses you and whispers that your life is in danger. That was exactly what happened to Joseph, a wealthy Nigerian millionaire, on what was supposed to be the best night of his life. How did one unexpected kiss change everything? How did a poor maid become the hero of the night? Find out now. The Bello mansion's gardens shone bright under the afternoon sun. The marble courtyard was full of life, with the smell of jollof rice, suya, pepper soup, and chin-chin mixing with sweet perfumes. Rich men and women in fine clothes walked around, laughing near the fountains and flowers, while a live band played soft high-life music. This was not just any party. Joseph Bello, 32 years old and CEO of Bello Industries, had signed a $50 million deal with an oil company, the biggest in the company's history. It would secure their future and prove him one of Nigeria's smartest young businessmen. Reporters moved through the crowd, taking notes and pictures. Joseph stood by the outdoor stage in a sharp black suit, his eyes full of pride but also tired from months of hard work. He remembered long nights, failed talks, and even enemies trying to stop him. But now he has succeeded. His late mother would have been proud. His father, once strong and powerful, was now in a hospital bed, his memory gone after an accident. As Joseph waited for his moment to speak, he noticed his two uncles standing near the front of the crowd. Uncle Emeka, the older of the two, was a tall man with a pot belly and a permanent frown on his face. He wore an expensive agbada that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Uncle Obiora, the younger uncle, was thinner and more cunning-looking, always watching, always calculating. Both men were smiling now, but Joseph had long ago learned not to trust those smiles. Ever since his father's accident, his uncles had been circling the family business like vultures, always asking for money, always wanting a bigger share of the company, always complaining about how they deserved more recognition for their contributions. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, his voice booming through the speakers that had been strategically placed around the outdoor venue. "Please put your hands together for our host, the man of the hour, the brilliant young CEO who has just secured the biggest deal in Bello Industries history, Mr. Joseph Bello." The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. People stood up from their tables, clapping enthusiastically. Photographers rushed forward, their cameras flashing. Joseph straightened his bow tie, took a deep breath, and walked toward the stage. His polished Italian leather shoes clicked against the marble floor with each step. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, the expectation in the air. This was his moment, the culmination of years of sacrifice and dedication. He climbed the 3 steps to the stage and stood behind the microphone. The applause slowly died down, and all eyes turned to him expectantly. Some people were still standing, waiting to hear what he would say. His business partners from the oil company sat at the front table, smiling proudly. His uncles stood together, their expressions unreadable. This was it. This was his moment to shine. He opened his mouth to speak. "Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for..." Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement. A figure in a simple blue uniform was running toward the stage, weaving between the tables with desperate speed. People turned to look, confused. Security guards started moving forward, but the figure was too fast. Before anyone could react, before anyone could stop her, before Joseph could even process what was happening, the figure reached him. It was Adana, the housemaid. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Adana grabbed his face with both hands, her fingers pressing against his cheeks with surprising strength, and pressed her lips firmly against his. The crowd gasped collectively, a wave of shock rippling through the courtyard. Someone dropped a glass, the sound of shattering crystal cutting through the stunned silence. Joseph's eyes went wide with absolute shock and confusion. What was she doing? Had she lost her mind? Was this some kind of breakdown? But then she whispered against his lips, her voice urgent and trembling with fear, "Sir, kiss me back or your life is in danger. Please trust me." Joseph tried to pull away, his hands coming up to push her shoulders. Confusion, anger, and embarrassment flooded through him. His reputation was being destroyed in front of everyone. But Adana's grip tightened, and she whispered again, more desperately this time, If you move 1 inch, you will be dead. There's a sniper aimed at your head right now. Please, sir, I'm begging you to trust me." Joseph's mind raced. A sniper? What was she talking about? This had to be madness. But something in her voice, something desperate and genuine, something in her eyes that were pleading with him, made him hesitate. Against every instinct screaming at him to push her away, against every fiber of his being that wanted to demand answers, he made a split-second decision. He kissed her back. His hands moved to her waist, and he pulled her closer, playing along with whatever insanity this was. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps. The photographers went crazy, their cameras flashing like lightning. Some people stood up from their tables, craning their necks to see better. Others covered their mouths in shock. His business associates exchanged bewildered glances, wondering if this was some kind of publicity stunt. His uncles stood frozen, their mouths hanging open in what looked like genuine surprise. "Is this some kind of joke?" someone shouted from the crowd. "What is happening?" another voice cried out, laughing nervously. "Has he gone mad?" a woman asked loudly. "That's his maid, isn't it?" The orphan girl? Adana slowly began moving backward, still kissing Joseph, pulling him with her toward the side entrance of the mansion. Her movements were deliberate but looked natural, as if they were simply caught up in passion. He followed, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. His hands stayed on her waist as they moved together across the stage and down the steps. Step by step, they moved away from the microphone, away from the confused and scandalized crowd, away from the danger she claimed was lurking somewhere in the darkness. The security guards looked at each other, unsure whether to intervene. Was their boss in danger, or was this a private moment they shouldn't interrupt? They hesitated, and in that hesitation, Joseph and Adana made it to the doorway. Finally, they reached the heavy wooden door that led inside the mansion. Adana pushed it open with one hand while still holding Joseph close with the other, and they stumbled inside. She slammed the door shut behind them and immediately locked it. Outside, the guests stood in absolute stunned silence for a long moment. Then, like a dam breaking, the whispers began. They started quiet, but quickly grew louder, more animated, more cruel. "Did you all see that? I can't believe what just happened. That was his maid, wasn't it? The girl who lives in his house. How absolutely disgraceful, in front of everyone. I always knew there was something suspicious going on in that house. A man of his status, his education, his wealth, with a common maid, how could he stoop so low? His poor father must be turning in his grave. Oh wait, he's not dead yet, just lost his mind. Maybe that's worse. No wonder he never got married. He's been busy with the help. What will the business partners think? This is so unprofessional. I heard she's an orphan." Probably trying to trap him for his money, the jokes and harsh comments flowed freely. Some people laughed cruelly, others shook their heads in what they pretended was disappointment, but was really just eager gossip. A few guests actually pulled out their phones and started recording videos or taking photos, already planning how they would share this scandalous news on social media. The business journalists scribbled frantically in their notebooks, already crafting headlines in their minds. Joseph's reputation, so carefully built over, was crumbling to dust outside that locked door. But inside the room, a completely different scene was unfolding. The moment the door closed and locked, Joseph grabbed Adana by the shoulders and physically pushed her away from him. His face was twisted with fury, his hands trembling with barely controlled rage. His perfectly styled hair had become disheveled, his bow tie was askew, and his eyes blazed with an anger that Adana had never seen before. "What have you done?" he roared, his voice echoing off the walls of the room. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Do you understand what just happened out there?" Adana stumbled backward, her eyes already filling with tears. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. Joseph advanced toward her, his fists clenched at his sides, his entire body shaking with emotion. "Answer me," he shouted. "My reputation, my business relationships, my credibility, everything I've worked for my entire life. You just destroyed it all in front of hundreds of people. The journalists were there. The cameras were rolling. By tomorrow morning, this will be all over the news, all over social media. My business partners will question my judgment. My competitors will use this against me. Everything is ruined." "Sir, please," Adana finally found her voice, holding up her hands defensively, tears streaming down her face. "If I hadn't done what I did, you would be dead right now. Dead, do you understand? You wouldn't be standing here yelling at me because you would be lying in a pool of your own blood." Joseph stopped, his anger momentarily interrupted by confusion. "What are you talking about? What kind of excuse is this?" "I heard them, sir," Adana said, her voice shaking so badly she could barely get the words out. "I heard Uncle Emeka on the phone. It was about an hour ago. I was in the house, preparing extra refreshments for the guests, when I walked past your father's old study. The door was slightly open and I heard Uncle Emeka's voice. He was speaking in Igbo, probably thinking no one would understand or care. But sir, I understood every word." She took a shaky breath and continued. "He said, once he finishes his speech and raises the toast, take the shot. Make sure he doesn't survive. We can't let this deal go through. Once he's gone, we'll contest the will and take control of everything. Sir, he was planning to have you assassinated right there on that stage." Joseph stared at her, his face going pale. "Uncle Emeka, you're lying. You must have misheard. You're making this up because—" "I'm not lying, sir," Adana cried desperately. "I swear on everything I hold dear, on the memory of your father's kindness to me, on my own life. He was planning to kill you. There's a sniper positioned somewhere outside. The function is outdoor, sir. You were standing right there on that elevated stage, exposed, lit up by all those lights. You were a perfect target. One bullet to the head and you would have been gone before anyone even understood what happened." She fell to her knees, sobbing now. "I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just tell security because what if they were involved? What if your uncles had paid them off? I couldn't call the police because by the time they arrived, you would already be dead. I had only seconds to think, and the only thing I could come up with was to get you off that stage and away from the sniper's line of sight. I knew I would ruin your reputation. I knew everyone would judge me. I knew you would hate me. But sir, I would rather have you alive and hating me than dead and gone forever." Joseph stood there, frozen, his mind struggling desperately to process what she was saying. His uncle? His own blood? Planning to murder him? It seemed impossible, utterly unthinkable. And yet, he thought about the way his uncles had been acting recently, the way they'd been pressuring him to sign over portions of the company, the way Uncle Emeka had insisted on being involved in security arrangements for tonight's event, the way they'd both seemed strangely eager about this celebration, almost too eager. "Why should I believe you?" he asked, but his voice had lost its sharp edge. Doubt was creeping in. "Because I have absolutely no reason to lie," Adana said, looking up at him with swollen, tear-filled eyes. "I risked everything by doing what I did. My job, my home, my reputation, maybe even my life, because if your uncles find out I interfered, they might come after me too. But I couldn't let you die, sir. I couldn't stand there and watch you get killed when I had the power to stop it, even if stopping it meant destroying both of our lives in a different way." Joseph turned away from her, running both hands through his hair, pulling at it in frustration and confusion. His whole world was spinning out of control. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed his head of security, a man named Ibrahim who had been with the family for 15 years. "Ibrahim," he said when the man answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "This is extremely urgent. I need you to check the perimeters of the estate immediately. Check every building that has a line of sight to the outdoor courtyard. Look for anyone suspicious, especially anyone with weapons. Check the rooftops, the windows, everywhere, but be discreet. Don't let anyone know I ordered this, especially not my uncles." "Sir?" Ibrahim's voice was confused and concerned. "Is everything all right? We heard about what happened on the stage." "Never mind that," Joseph cut him off sharply. "Just do what I'm asking. Check for snipers, now, and call me back immediately when you find something." "Snipers? Sir, are you serious?" "Ibrahim, I say, I have never been more serious in my entire life. Check now." He hung up and looked at Adana, who was still kneeling on the floor, her yellow dress stained with her tears. They waited in tense, painful silence. The muffled sounds of the party continuing outside filtered through the walls. People were still eating, still drinking, still gossiping about what they'd witnessed. 5 minutes crawled by like 5 hours. Joseph paced back and forth like a caged animal. Adana remained on the floor, too afraid and exhausted to move. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, his phone rang. He answered it on the first ring. "Sir," Ibrahim's voice was tense and shocked. "We found someone, a man with a high-powered sniper rifle on the roof of the building directly across from your estate. He had a clear shot of the stage. Sir, the rifle was loaded and ready. If he had pulled that trigger..." Ibrahim's voice trailed off, the implications too horrible to complete. Joseph felt his legs nearly give out beneath him. He grabbed the edge of a nearby table for support, his knuckles turning white. "Did you apprehend him?" Joseph asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir. We have him detained. He's asking for a lawyer and refusing to talk, but we found his phone. There are text messages, payment confirmations, detailed instructions about the hit. Sir, this was a professional assassination attempt." "Bring him to the main entrance," Joseph ordered, his voice growing stronger as shock transformed into cold fury. "Don't let anyone see him yet. Keep him hidden until I give you further instructions. And Ibrahim, check his phone for who hired him. I want names." "Sir, we already checked. The messages are from 2 phone numbers. We traced them. Sir, I'm sorry to tell you this, but the numbers are registered to your Uncle Emeka and Uncle Obiora." The phone nearly slipped from Joseph's hand. He closed his eyes, fighting back emotions he couldn't even name. Betrayal, hurt, rage, disbelief. His own uncles, his father's brothers, men who had held him as a baby, men who had attended his university graduation, men who had eaten at his table, slept under his roof, benefited from his family's generosity for decades. They had tried to have him murdered. He hung up without another word and slowly turned to look at Adana. She was still on the floor, watching him with fearful, hopeful eyes. He walked toward her and, to her surprise, knelt down beside her. His anger was gone now, replaced by something else entirely. "You were telling the truth," he said softly. "They really tried to kill me. And you saved my life." Fresh tears spilled down Adana's cheeks. "I'm sorry I ruined everything for you, sir. I'm sorry I destroyed your reputation. I didn't know what else to do." "Don't apologize," Joseph said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "You did the only thing you could do. You saved me." He helped her to her feet, and for a moment they just stood there, 2 people whose lives had been forever changed in the span of 20 minutes. But Joseph's grief quickly hardened into something else. Determination. His uncles wanted to destroy him. They wanted his company, his wealth, his life. Fine. He would give them exactly what they deserved. He would expose them in front of everyone, just as they had planned to kill him in front of everyone. "Come with me," he said to Adana, taking her hand. "This isn't over yet. Let me tell you about Joseph Bello before we continue with what happened next. You need to understand who this man was and how he became the person standing in that room. Joseph was born into wealth and privilege, yes, but his life had never been easy. He was the only son of Chief Emmanuel Bello, one of Nigeria's most successful and respected businessmen. Chief Emmanuel had built his fortune from nothing, starting as a small trader in Onitsha and eventually building an empire that spanned real estate, oil, manufacturing, and import-export businesses. He was known throughout Lagos as a man of integrity, someone whose word was his bond, someone who gave generously to charities and helped countless people rise from poverty. But Joseph's birth had come at a terrible cost. His mother, Kioma, a beautiful woman known for her kindness and intelligence, had complications during childbirth. The doctors tried everything, but she bled out before they could save her. Baby Joseph survived, but he would never know his mother's touch, never hear her voice, never feel her love. This tragedy haunted Chief Emmanuel for the rest of his life. He looked at his son and saw both his greatest joy and his deepest pain. To compensate for the loss of Kioma, Chief Emmanuel poured all his love into raising Joseph. He gave the boy everything he could, the best nannies, the best schools, the best opportunities. Joseph attended Corona School in Lagos, then went to King's College for secondary school. When it was time for university, Chief Emmanuel sent him to Oxford University in England, where Joseph studied economics and business administration. After his undergraduate degree, Joseph went to Harvard Business School for his MBA, graduating top of his class. But all this education and privilege came with a price. Joseph grew up lonely. He was surrounded by servants, tutors, and bodyguards. But he had few real friends. Other children his age were either intimidated by his wealth or wanted to befriend him only for what he could give them. In England and America, he was always seen as the rich African kid, never fully accepted, never truly belonging. He learned to be distant, to protect his heart, to trust no one completely. He never had a girlfriend, never experienced teenage romance, never learned how to connect with women on an emotional level. His whole life was consumed by living up to his father's expectations and preparing to take over the family business. He told himself that love was a luxury he couldn't afford, that relationships were distractions, that he didn't need anyone. Then, 2 years ago, tragedy struck again. Chief Emmanuel was driving home from a business meeting when his car was involved in a terrible accident. The official police report said it was a brake failure, just a tragic mechanical malfunction. But the timing was suspicious. It happened just days after the chief had announced major changes to his will, changes that would give Joseph complete control and significantly reduce his brother's inheritance. The accident left Chief Emmanuel alive, but with severe traumatic brain injury. He survived the surgery, but when he woke up, his memory was gone. He didn't recognize his son, he didn't remember his wife. He didn't remember building his business empire. He was just a confused old man, trapped in a prison of forgotten memories, living in a private hospital room with 24-hour nursing care. At just 29 years old, Joseph had to take over everything: the company, the properties, the investments, the charitable foundations, the hundreds of employees who depended on Bello Industries for their livelihoods. It was overwhelming and terrifying. He worked 18-hour days, teaching himself on the job, making mistakes and learning from them, slowly growing into the role his father had prepared him for. But his uncles made everything harder. Uncle Emeka and Uncle Obiora, his father's younger brothers, had always been jealous. They had worked for the company over the years, yes, but in minor positions. Chief Emmanuel had never fully trusted them with real power because he knew their characters. They were greedy, lazy, always looking for shortcuts. When Joseph took over, they immediately started making demands. They wanted executive positions they weren't qualified for. They wanted larger shares of company profits. They wanted access to company funds for their personal expenses. They wanted. Joseph had tried to be fair. He gave them reasonable allowances. He involved them in some minor business decisions. He invited them to family events. But it was never enough. And now he realized with horrible clarity they had decided that if they couldn't have the company through persuasion, they would take it through murder. And now let me tell you about Adana, because her story is equally important to understanding what happened that night. Adana Nwankwo was 28 years old. She had been born to parents she never knew. As an infant, she had been abandoned at the gates of St. Mary's orphanage on the outskirts of Lagos. The nuns who ran the orphanage had given her the name Adana, which means father's daughter in Igbo, hoping that God would be the father she didn't have on earth. Growing up in the orphanage was hard. There was never enough food, never enough clothes, never enough attention to go around. The older children bullied the younger ones. The nuns did their best, but they were overwhelmed and underfunded. Adana learned early to be quiet, to not cause trouble, to be grateful for whatever small kindnesses came her way. But everything changed when she was 8 years old. Chief Emmanuel Bello had started a charitable program to support orphanages across Lagos. He didn't just write checks, he actually visited the institutions, meeting the children, understanding their needs. When he came to St. Mary's, Adana was in the courtyard, reading an old tattered book about Nigerian history. While other children crowded around the rich visitor, hoping for sweets or gifts, Adana sat under a tree, absorbed in her reading. Chief Emmanuel noticed her. He walked over and asked what she was reading. Adana, shy but excited to share, told him about the book, about the stories of Nigerian heroes and leaders. They talked for almost an hour. The chief was impressed by her intelligence, her curiosity, her dignity, despite her circumstances. From that day forward, he took special interest in her education. He arranged for her to attend a good primary school. He provided her with books, uniforms, supplies. He visited her regularly, always asking about her studies, always encouraging her to work hard. As she grew older, he helped her get into a good secondary school. He became the father figure she had never had. When Adana turned 18 and was about to age out of the orphanage, Chief Emmanuel did something extraordinary. He brought her to his home and gave her a job. But this wasn't just any job. He saw potential in her that others missed. He trained her personally in household management, financial records, staff supervision. He enrolled her in part-time university courses. He treated her like the daughter he never had, the child that fate had taken from him when Kioma died. For Chief Emmanuel, Adana represented redemption, a chance to be the father he'd always wanted to be, but couldn't be fully for Joseph, who was away at school so much. For Adana, Chief Emmanuel was the miracle she'd prayed for all her life. A family. But Joseph, when he came home during breaks, didn't see it that way. He saw an outsider being given what should have been his. His father's time, his father's attention, his father's love. He was polite but cold to Adana. He never spoke to her unless absolutely necessary. He made it clear through his actions that she was staff, nothing more, certainly not family. Adana accepted this treatment without complaint. She understood that Joseph felt threatened by her presence. She never tried to come between father and son. She simply did her work quietly and stayed out of Joseph's way whenever he was home. But then Chief Emmanuel had his accident and everything changed. Joseph came home permanently to run the business. Suddenly, Adana and Joseph were living under the same roof constantly. The house felt different without the chief's warm presence. It felt cold, empty, sad. Adana continued her duties, managing the household. She supervised the cook, the gardeners, the security staff. She managed household expenses and ensured everything ran smoothly. She visited Chief Emmanuel in the hospital regularly, reading to him, talking to him, hoping some part of him could still hear and understand. And slowly, without meaning to, without wanting to, Adana began to notice things about Joseph. She saw how hard he worked, often coming home after midnight, his face lined with exhaustion. She saw him skip meals because he was too busy. She saw him sit alone in his father's study, holding his head in his hands, carrying the weight of an empire on his shoulders. She started leaving dinner for him when he worked late, just a covered plate on the dining table with a note saying it could be reheated. She made sure his favorite coffee blend was always stocked. When she noticed he was developing headaches from stress, she quietly placed painkillers and water on his desk. These were small gestures, things she told herself were just part of her job. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She was beginning to care for him. And over time, that caring grew into something deeper, something she didn't dare name. She fell in love with a man who barely acknowledged her existence. A man so far above her station that loving him was both pointless and painful. So she buried her feelings deep and continued her work, never expecting anything, never hoping for anything, content to love him from a distance, to serve his household and honor the memory of the man who had saved her life all those years ago. Until tonight, when she overheard Uncle Emeka's phone call and realized that the man she loved was about to die. In that moment, nothing else mattered, not her job, not her reputation, not her dignity, not even her safety. She had to save him, no matter the cost. Back in the present moment, Joseph stood in the room, staring at Adana with new understanding. "Come with me," he said again, his voice firm but not unkind. "We're going back out there." "Sir?" Adana looked terrified. "I can't face those people again. They already hate me." "They don't understand what really happened," Joseph said. "But they're about to learn the truth. All of it." He took her hand, and together they walked back through the mansion toward the outdoor courtyard. As they approached the door, they could hear the party had resumed, though the energy was different now. The laughter sounded forced, the conversations were hushed and gossipy. Everyone was talking about what they'd witnessed. Joseph pushed open the door and stepped out into the courtyard, still holding Adana's hand. The crowd immediately fell silent. All eyes turned to them. People stopped mid-sentence, forks frozen halfway to mouths, drinks held suspended in air. Joseph walked through the crowd with Adana beside him, heading straight for the stage. People moved aside, creating a path, staring with undisguised curiosity and judgment. Joseph could see the smirks, the raised eyebrows, the disapproving frowns. He ignored all of it. He climbed back onto the stage and pulled Adana up with him. She kept her head down, too ashamed to look at anyone. Joseph picked up the microphone, tapped it twice to make sure it was still on, and addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "I apologize for the unexpected and shocking interruption earlier this evening. I'm sure you're all confused and disappointed. Some of you are probably disgusted. Some of you have already decided that I'm a disgrace. I don't blame you. From your perspective, what you witnessed was inexcusable." He paused, letting his words sink in. The crowd watched him, uncertain where this was going. "But you don't have the full story," Joseph continued, "and before this night ends, before any of you leave here and spread your versions of what happened, I want you to know the truth." He gestured to Adana, who was trembling beside him. "This woman's name is Adana. She has worked in my household for 10 years. She was raised in an orphanage that my father funded. When she had nowhere to go, my father brought her into our home and trained her. He trusted her with everything, and tonight she saved my life." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People exchanged confused glances. "About an hour ago," Joseph explained, "Adana overheard a phone conversation. Someone in my own family, someone I trusted, was arranging to have me assassinated. Tonight, right here, right on this stage. There was a sniper positioned in the building across the street, with orders to shoot me the moment I finished my speech." The crowd erupted in gasps and shocked exclamations. Some people stood up. Others covered their mouths in horror. "Adana only had seconds to react," Joseph continued, his voice growing stronger. "She couldn't call for help without alerting the conspirators. She couldn't tell security because she didn't know who could be trusted. She had to get me off this stage, out of the sniper's line of sight immediately. So she did the only thing she could think of at that moment. She created a distraction so dramatic that I would have no choice but to leave the stage with her." He looked down at Adana, who was crying silently. "She knew it would ruin her reputation. She knew you would all judge her. She knew I would be angry with her. She knew she might lose her job, her home, everything. But she did it anyway because she valued my life more than her own dignity." The mood in the crowd was shifting now. Some people looked ashamed of their earlier gossip. Others looked concerned, even frightened. "My security team has confirmed her story," Joseph announced. "They found the sniper. They apprehended him. They have evidence of who hired him." He looked directly at Uncle Emeka, who stood near the front, his face a mixture of confusion and barely hidden anger. "Uncle Emeka," Joseph said, his voice cold, "please join me on stage." Uncle Emeka hesitated, his eyes darted around nervously, but he had no choice. Refusing would look suspicious. He plastered on a fake smile and walked up to the stage, spreading his arms as if expecting an embrace. "My dear nephew," he said loudly, "what a wonderful celebration. Though I must say, that display earlier was quite—" "Shut up," Joseph cut him off sharply. The smile vanished from Uncle Emeka's face. "Excuse me?" "I said shut up," Joseph repeated. He turned to address the crowd. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of success, of family, of achievement, but instead I'm here to expose a traitor. The crowd gasped. Uncle Emeka's face went white. "My security team has just apprehended a sniper from the building across the street," Joseph announced. "Ibrahim, bring him in." The crowd parted as 2 security guards dragged a man in dark clothes through the courtyard. The man's hands were bound, his face defiant. They brought him to the base of the stage. "Tell them," Joseph ordered, "tell them who hired you." The sniper glared up at him, but said nothing. "Your phone has already been seized," Joseph continued. "We have your messages, your payment receipts, everything. So you might as well speak." The sniper looked at Uncle Emeka, then back at Joseph. Finally, he spoke. "He hired me," he said, nodding toward Uncle Emeka. "Him and his brother. They paid me 5 million naira to take you out once you finished your speech." The crowd exploded in shock and outrage. Uncle Emeka tried to run, but security guards immediately surrounded him. His brother, Uncle Obiora, tried to slip away through the crowd, but was also caught. "Why?" Joseph shouted at his uncles, his composure finally breaking. "Why would you do this? I'm your brother's son, your own blood." Uncle Emeka's face twisted with rage and bitterness. "Blood," he spat. "You talk about blood? Your father gave everything to you, everything. We were his brothers, but he treated us like beggars, always controlling the money, always deciding what we could or couldn't do. And then you came back from your fancy schools abroad and acted just like him. You think you're better than us. You think you deserve all of this. We built this company too," Uncle Obiora shouted. "We worked alongside your father, but he gave you everything in his will. You, who were barely 30 years old. What about us? What about our families? We deserve that money. We deserve this company." Joseph stared at them, seeing clearly for the first time the depth of their greed and hatred. These men had never loved him. They had never cared about him as family. To them, he was just an obstacle, something standing between them and wealth. "Take them away," Joseph said quietly to the police officers who had just arrived, alerted by his security team. "Charge them with attempted murder and conspiracy." As the police led his uncles away, Uncle Emeka shouted over his shoulder, "You'll regret this. That money should be ours. You don't deserve any of it. You're nothing without your father's name." He looked out at the crowd and saw Adana standing at the edge, her head bowed, tears streaming down her face. "Adana," he called out, "please come here." She looked up, terrified, but slowly walked through the crowd. People stepped aside for her, and when she reached the stage, Joseph held out his hand. She took it, and he pulled her up beside him. "This woman," he said to the crowd, "is the bravest person I know, and I owe her my life." The crowd applauded again, this time for Adana. She stood there, overwhelmed, not knowing where to look or what to do. When the applause finally died down, Joseph announced that the party was over. Guests began to leave, still buzzing with shock over everything that had happened. Finally, after what felt like hours, the estate was empty. The caterers had cleaned up, the musicians had packed away their instruments, and silence had descended over the grand mansion. Joseph and Adana stood in the main living room, suddenly alone after the chaos of the evening. Joseph loosened his bow tie and sat down heavily on one of the plush sofas. Adana stood awkwardly near the door, not sure if she should leave or stay. "Sit," Joseph said, patting the space beside him. "Please." She hesitated, then slowly walked over and sat down, keeping a respectful distance between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly, marking the passing seconds. "I owe you an apology," Joseph finally said, turning to face her. "Actually, I owe you many apologies. Sir, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do," he interrupted gently. "When you first came to this house, I was 19 years old, home for summer break. I saw how my father treated you, how he cared for you, and I hated it. I hated that he gave you attention that I felt should have been mine. My mother was dead, and my father was spending his time with an orphan girl he barely knew. I was jealous and bitter." Adana looked down at her hands, saying nothing. "As the years went by," Joseph continued, "I watched you grow up. I watched you become intelligent, capable, kind. I watched my father trust you with more and more responsibility. And instead of appreciating you, instead of being grateful for all you did for our family, I remained cold. I treated you like you were invisible, like you didn't matter. You had every right to, sir," Adana said softly. "I was just—" "Don't," Joseph cut her off. "Don't diminish yourself. You were never just anything. My father saw something in you that I was too blind and too proud to see. He saw your heart." He reached over and gently took her hand. She looked up at him, surprised. "Tonight you saved my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You could have died too. That sniper might have shot you, but you didn't think about that, did you? You only thought about saving me." Tears welled up in Adana's eyes again. "I couldn't let them kill you, sir. I couldn't." "Why?" Joseph asked, his dark eyes searching hers. "Why did you risk everything for someone who's treated you so poorly?" Adana bit her lip, hesitating. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Because I care about you, sir. I always have." Joseph felt something shift in his chest. "I realize something now," Joseph said slowly. I understand why my father loved you so much. It's because you have the kind of heart that's rare in this world. You give without expecting anything back. You love without conditions. You sacrifice without counting the cost. He moved closer to her, still holding her hand. When you kissed me tonight, he said, his voice dropping lower, it was to save my life. But when our lips touched, something happened that I didn't expect. For the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never felt before. A connection. A warmth. A sense of belonging. Adana's heart was racing. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. I've never had a girlfriend, Joseph admitted. I've never been in love. My whole life has been about education, about business, about living up to my father's legacy. I've been so focused on success that I forgot about connection, about emotion, about love. But in that moment, when you held me, when you kissed me, I felt alive in a way I'd never experienced. He reached up and gently touched her face, wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. I know I don't deserve you, he said. I know I've been cold and distant and cruel. But if you'll give me a chance, I want to try. I want to know you, really know you. I want to understand who you are, what you dream about, what makes you happy. I want to be the kind of man worthy of your love. Adana was crying openly now, unable to hold back her emotions. Sir, My name is Joseph, he interrupted with a small smile. Please, call me Joseph. Joseph, she whispered, testing his name on her lips. He smiled wider. That's better. They sat there for a moment, just looking at each other. Years of distance and misunderstanding melting away between them. He hesitated, then asked, Adana, may I kiss you again? Not because we're in danger, not as an act, but because I want to, with your permission. Adana's face flushed, a shy smile appearing through her tears. She nodded slowly, unable to speak. Joseph leaned forward, and this time when their lips met, it was different. It was gentle, tender, full of promise and possibility. It was a kiss that spoke of new beginnings, of healing, of love that had been waiting patiently in the shadows to finally step into the light. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Over the next few weeks, Joseph and Adana spent every possible moment together. They took walks in the evening around the estate gardens. They had dinner together, just the two of them, talking and laughing until late into the night. One evening, exactly 6 weeks after the dramatic party, Joseph took Adana to the balcony that overlooked Lagos City. The lights of the metropolis sparkled below them like fallen stars. He held her hand and turned to face her. Adana, he said, his voice serious but warm, these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what it means to love and be loved. You've taught me that true value isn't measured in money or success, but in the quality of our hearts and the depth of our connections. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Adana gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I know we haven't known each other long, not really, Joseph continued, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. But I also know that I've been waiting for you my entire life. I just didn't realize it until you kissed me and saved me, in more ways than one. He got down on one knee, and Adana started crying again, happy tears streaming down her face. Adana Nwankwo, he said, will you marry me? Will you be my partner, my friend, my love, for the rest of our lives? Through her tears, Adana nodded vigorously. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Joseph, I will. He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood up, pulling her into his arms. They kissed under the stars, both of them feeling like they had finally found home. So to my amazing audience, what did you learn from this story? Have you ever misjudged someone only to discover their true worth later? Do you believe that love can truly transform people? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on Joseph and Adana's journey. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up so I know it resonated with you. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss future stories about love, courage, and the unexpected ways our lives can change. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next story.